of what they were used for, and it's still quite a puzzle and a mystery to historians what function they actually served.
For almost 2 centuries, a strange bronze object has been sitting behind museum glass with a label that says more than it admits. Unknown purpose. A hollow cage of metal, 12 flat faces, circular openings cut through each side, 20 little rounded knobs rising from the corners. More than 100 have been pulled from the soil of the old Roman frontier, and Rome never explained a single one. No manual, no drawing, no inventory entry, no inscription, nothing.
Roman dodecahedron is remarkable and unusual because there's not many more than 100 known to exist.
The Roman dodecahedron is one of the strangest surviving objects from the ancient world, not because it is ugly or primitive, but because it is too carefully made to be meaningless and too widespread to be accidental. And now, one nearly perfect example recovered from sealed ground in Lincolnshire, England, has forced the question historians have avoided for generations. What was Rome trying not to record? The object Rome refused to explain. Before we get to what was found inside the Norton Disney dodecahedron, we need to understand why the outside of this object is already a problem. The Roman Empire was not casual about paperwork. This was a civilization that documented roads, bridges, aqueducts, taxes, grain shipments, military equipment, household tools, construction techniques, surveying instruments, weights, measures, weapons, medicines, and machines. If something mattered, Rome wrote it down. Roman authors like Vitruvius and Pliny the Elder preserved entire worlds of technical knowledge. Roman administrators stamped bricks, counted coins, marked property, catalogued supplies, and recorded the movement of goods across provinces. And yet this object, expensive, precise, difficult to manufacture, and found again and again across Roman territory, leaves behind no explanation at all. That is not normal. A dodecahedron was not something a careless village smith could make in an afternoon. To cast a hollow 12-faced bronze form, an ancient metalworker needed real mastery. The lost wax process had to be controlled with skill. The furnace had to reach intense temperatures. The alloy had to flow cleanly into complex spaces. The small knobs at every vertex had to be formed without cracking, deforming, or collapsing the piece. This was specialized work, and bronze was valuable. In the ancient world, bronze could become tools, blades, fittings, military equipment, or trade goods. It was not wasted on nonsense. Every one of these objects represented material, time, and expertise. More than 130 examples are now known, and yet no two match perfectly. Their sizes differ. Their hole diameters vary. Their proportions change from object to object. But the most disturbing thing is not the variation. It is the silence. None of them carry numbers. None carry calibration marks. None carry maker's stamps. None show ownership symbols. There are no instructions scratched into the surface. No dedication. No signature. No unit marks. No obvious signs of official use. And across the surviving Roman world, in paintings, sculptures, tomb reliefs, military documents, administrative lists, philosophical writings, technical treatises, and household inventories, the dodecahedron never appears. It is not shown. It is not named. It is not described. For an object this elaborate to circulate for generations without leaving even one sentence in the Roman record is almost impossible to explain as coincidence. Rome recorded ordinary things. This was not ordinary. Something about the dodecahedron placed it outside the world Rome wanted to preserve. And the Norton Disney specimen is the one that made that silence much harder to ignore. The discovery that changed everything. The Norton Disney dodecahedron was not found loose in a plowed field. It was not dragged from a riverbed. It was not discovered in disturbed topsoil by chance. It came from a sealed archaeological context. That matters. A sealed context means the soil around the object had not been disturbed since the moment it was buried. No later digging cut through it. No flood rearranged it. No farmer's plow shifted it from somewhere else. The object was exactly where someone had left it. The Norton Disney History and Archaeology Group, working under proper archaeological supervision, recovered it carefully from deep underground. Nearby were pottery fragments and a small group of ancient coins. This was not a random loss. Someone placed it there, and the condition of the object only makes the story darker. The Norton Disney dodecahedron is almost shockingly intact. Its surface retains a smooth patina. It shows no major breakage, no melted damage, no obvious signs of long use, no chipped knobs, no battered edges. People who handled it described the strange feeling of looking at something that seemed almost newly made. That is not what you expect from a valuable bronze artifact abandoned for nearly 2,000 years, because bronze was usually recycled. If an object broke, it could be melted down. If it became useless, it could become something else. No practical person in the Roman provinces would bury a complete, valuable, reusable bronze object unless something about that object mattered more than its material value. If it had been hidden from raiders, the owner would likely have intended to return. But no one returned. It stayed buried, which means whoever lowered it into the ground may never have meant to reclaim it. That changes everything. Because burying a perfect bronze object is not preservation. It looks like disposal. It looks like concealment. It looks like someone wanted this thing removed from the living world and placed somewhere it could not easily be found. And that leads to the question Rome seems to have worked very hard to prevent. What was it used for? Every theory collapses. For 200 years, researchers have tried to make the dodecahedron ordinary. They have called it a candlestick, a knitting tool, a merchant's weight, a measuring device, a rangefinder, a surveying instrument, a sundial, a toy, a coin tester, a religious charm. Again and again, the theories sound reasonable for a moment, and then they fall apart. The candle holder idea became popular because traces of wax were reported on some examples, but the form itself argues against it. A hollow object with holes on every face cannot hold melted wax. A lamp or candle support should show heat marks, soot, burn discoloration, or repeated contact damage. The dodecahedrons do not. The wax residue appears more likely to have come from the surrounding soil than from regular candle use. The knitting theory also looks clever until it meets the evidence. Modern people can loop yarn around the knobs and produce small tube-like fabric, but that does not prove the Romans did it. Roman textile production used other known techniques, including needle-based methods. And if these objects were handled repeatedly with fiber, there should be signs of wear. Polished edges, abraded knobs, microscopic fibers use marks, but those traces are absent. Then come the measurement theories. Rangefinder, surveyor's tool, coin gauge, standard weight. All of them collapse for the same reason: no standardization. A measuring instrument must measure something consistently, but dodecahedrons do not share fixed dimensions. Their hole sizes do not follow one universal system. They lack alignment marks, reference points, inscribed units, or axes. Roman surveyors already had documented tools like the groma. Those appear in writings, artwork, and even funerary contexts. The dodecahedron appears nowhere. Coin testers required specific calibrated holes matching known coin sizes. The dodecahedron's openings vary too widely and match no known Roman coin system. A sundial needs a shadow casting element and hour markings. The dodecahedron has neither. Every practical explanation runs into the same wall. It cannot reliably measure. It cannot hold liquid. It cannot contain wax. It cannot withstand repeated daily use without leaving signs. It is hollow. It is full of openings. It is costly. It is unmarked. And yet someone kept making them. So the question shifts. Maybe the dodecahedron was never meant to belong to the practical world at all. Maybe its purpose was not found in what it measured, held, weighed, or displayed. Maybe its purpose was found in where it appeared. The hidden border of the Roman world. When the known discoveries are placed on a map, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. These objects do not come from Rome itself. They are absent from the Italian heartland. They do not belong to the great eastern provinces. They are not common in Spain, Egypt, or Syria. They are not concentrated in imperial capitals, major workshops, or central military sites. They cluster at the edge. Northern Gaul, Germania, Britannia, the old frontier. These were borderlands, places where Roman law pressed against older worlds. Celtic traditions, local cults, indigenous rituals, and Druidic memories did not vanish the moment Rome arrived. They survived beneath the surface, hidden under Roman names, Roman roads, and Roman authority. The distribution of the dodecahedrons is not only a geographical pattern, it is a cultural fault line, and the exact places where many were found deepen the mystery. They are not usually recovered from obvious domestic settings. They are not simply household objects. They appear near burials, wells, river crossings, and boundaries between settlement and wild land. To us, these may look like landscape features. To ancient people, they were thresholds. Rivers were not just water. Graves were not just burial places. Wells were not just sources of drinking water. Forest edges were not just changes in terrain. They were liminal places, spaces where one world touched another. In many pre-Roman belief systems, especially those tied to Celtic traditions, the boundary between the living and the dead was not fixed in the way modern people imagine it. Certain places, certain times, and certain rites could bring the two closer. And that is exactly where these objects keep appearing. Now consider the Roman side of this. Rome was tolerant when local religion could be absorbed, renamed, taxed, and controlled. But practices involving magic, divination, unsanctioned rites, and communication with the dead were dangerous territory. Laws associated with forbidden magical practice could carry severe punishment. Roman campaigns against Druidic priesthoods in Britannia show how violently the empire could respond to spiritual systems it could not control. The assault on Anglesey in the 1st century remains one of the most famous examples. So now several clues begin pointing in the same direction. No inscriptions, no technical markings, no clear daily wear, no Roman documentation, deliberate burial, frontier distribution, connections to rivers, graves, wells, and boundaries. This no longer looks like a lost tool. It looks like an object used briefly, secretly, in controlled spaces, then hidden again. Something that belonged to rituals Rome did not want preserved. And then, the Norton Disney object raised the question that changed everything. What was still inside? What was found inside? This is where archaeology becomes forensic science. After the Norton Disney dodecahedron was removed from its sealed context, researchers examined it using modern chemical methods unavailable to earlier generations. Instead of focusing only on the outside surface, they looked into the hollow interior, searching for microscopic residues trapped within the metal. The results did not point to knitting. They did not point to military surveying. They did not point to coins, candles, or household use. The residue profile reportedly included stearic acid, an animal fat altered by heat, along with pine resin and lavender oil. These substances fit a world of burning, scent, purification, and ritual atmosphere. Animal fat could act as fuel. Resin could produce fragrant smoke. Aromatics could transform the air inside an enclosed space. But that was only the beginning. The most unsettling discovery was the presence of calcium phosphate combined with carbon microparticles. Further analysis suggested a specific origin: cremated human bone. Not random dirt, not modern contamination, not residue from being buried near a cemetery. The chemical pattern pointed toward bone that had been burned under conditions consistent with ancient cremation. The calcium phosphate and carbon particles appeared in a form associated with sustained fire in the presence of organic material. In other words, the object had not merely been buried among the dead, it had held part of them. Something had burned inside the hollow chamber. Something that included human remains. That single finding shattered the comfortable theories. The dodecahedron was not a passive curiosity. It was not a charming puzzle. It was not a forgotten measuring device. It was a bronze chamber that had been used to burn mixtures containing the physical remains of human beings, and that creates another contradiction. In both Roman and Celtic funerary traditions, the remains of the dead were treated with care. Cremated bone and ash were gathered, protected, and placed in containers designed to preserve them. Urns were closed. Remains were kept from wind, moisture, and dispersal. But the dodecahedron does the opposite. It is open on every side. 12 holes lead into the center. If ash, fat, resin, and aromatic oil were placed inside it, the object would not preserve them. It would release them. That means the openings were not a flaw. They were the purpose. The dodecahedron was not designed to hold the dead in silence. It was designed to let them move. A hollow bronze form with different-sized openings on opposing faces can act as a kind of controlled combustion chamber. The holes regulate oxygen. The knobs lift the object slightly from the surface below it, allowing air to move underneath. The hollow center becomes a burning space. The varying openings shape how heat and smoke escape. The knobs are not decoration. They are part of the breathing system. Imagine the object placed inside a closed ritual space: a tent, a chamber, a cave, a burial structure, a dark place with limited airflow. Inside the bronze chamber, a mixture is ignited: animal fat, resin, aromatic oil, and fragments of cremated bone. The fire begins to feed. Oxygen enters through the lower openings. Heat gathers. Smoke builds inside the hollow core. Then it escapes through 12 faces, not as a random cloud, as directed streams. The smoke carries scent, ash, and heat into the room. The flame inside casts shifting shadows through pentagonal faces. The walls move with patterns of light. The air changes. The dead are no longer sealed in an urn or buried beneath earth. They enter the atmosphere. They are breathed. They surround the living. In modern language, we might call this necromantic. To those who used, it may have been a controlled encounter with the dead, a way to bring remains, smoke, memory, and presence into one charged ritual moment. That would explain almost everything. Why the object was expensive, why it had no practical markings, why no two examples had to be identical, why it appears near liminal places, why it belongs to frontier regions, why it was kept out of Roman writing, why a perfect example might be buried and abandoned forever. If the dodecahedron was ritual hardware connected to the dead, then Rome had every reason not to celebrate it, document it, or fold it into official knowledge. The empire could name roads, aqueducts, weapons, and surveying tools because those things belonged to its image of order. But this belonged to another world. A world Rome conquered, but never fully erased. And that may be why modern institutions have often struggled to explain these objects clearly. For decades, museum labels have softened the mystery. One institution might call it a weight. Another might call it a tool of unknown use. Another might place it in storage rather than display it at all. Calling it unknown is safe. Calling it ritual is uncomfortable. Calling it connected to human remains is something else entirely. Because the dodecahedron challenges a familiar story. The standard image of Rome is marble, law, reason, roads, discipline, engineering, and empire. The frontier peoples are often placed in the opposite role: mystical, tribal, rational, conquered. But if these objects came from indigenous frontier traditions, then the old story fractures. Because this was not random superstition. It required metallurgical skill. It required knowledge of airflow. It required an understanding of combustion, fuel, smoke, scent, and enclosed space. It was a technology, not Roman technology in the official sense, but a ritual technology with its own rules, developed by people the empire dismissed as barbarian. And Rome, confronted with that knowledge, appears not to have recorded it. It suppressed it. It criminalized the world around it. It left no name, no manual, no diagram, no explanation. The object we call a Roman dodecahedron may carry an imperial label, but that label may be a mask. The word describes the geometry, not the truth. The bronze form does not speak in Roman administrative language. It speaks in fire, breath, smoke, burial, and silence. More than 130 have survived along the old frontier. Not one Roman writer explained them. Not one official record claimed them. Not one inscription identified their purpose. For nearly 2,000 years, the silence held. Then, an intact object came out of sealed Lincolnshire soil, still carrying microscopic traces of what had once burned inside it. And suddenly, the mystery was no longer just about shape. It was about what the living once did with the dead. It was about the rituals Rome feared. It was about the knowledge buried beneath conquest. And it was about the objects still sitting behind glass, described in cautious little labels that tell us almost nothing, because the truth is harder to display. The Roman dodecahedron was never just a puzzle. It was a survivor, a piece of forbidden ritual machinery, a bronze chamber built to breathe. And the reason Rome never explained it may be the same reason we are only beginning to understand it now. Because some parts of history were not forgotten. They were buried. And this one finally came back up.